got to start with a super weird clip.
Okay.
Before we get into this, I want you to just have an open mind.
Do you,
I can't help you.
I
you don't
want
know
you-
what you don't know what
I
this
want you
is?
to have an open mind. This is about cornflakes and masturbation.
To sexuality, including this. We'll talk about
I gotta take a drink.
But he lived what he taught. He abstained from it. He never consummated his marriage. He actually spent his honeymoon working on one of his anti-relations books. They had services at the same. They would perform circumcisions, does not matter the age, curb that desire, a clitoridectomy, where they would surgically remove the clitoris, an oophorectomy, where they would remove the ovaries, erectional surgery on the male member, chemical castration,
What
and
surgery?
so much more. But what does all this have to do with cornflakes? You see, Kellogg knew that diet had a lot of power. He was like, if we can make something so bland, just so bleh, nobody's gonna want to wax the pole anymore. So his cereal cornflakes was designed to help prevent waxing the pole. It is important to note that his brother saw there was a business opportunity and did not care about all the wacky woo-woo. He was like, we could sell a lot of this, okay? John was like, I hate Masturbahtzia.
See, you like that part. Yeah.
That is someone we hold, or America is held in reverence, not us, but Kellogg. And I guess his disdain for sex and masturbation. I don't understand it.
Sex
But-
period? I don't know. It's pathology.
But what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think about Kellogg or cornflakes or his fear of orgasm. It's a pathology. So
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Omar A. Morris with us.
whole name, huh? Okay.
Engineer to the stars. Actually, I'm gonna let you take your own introduction. Tell us what you want us to know.
Well, Dave, engineer, background computer science and mathematics. What do you know? My hobbies, how many kids I have, all that. Just I'm here to have a conversation with my brother about several topics that he's going to rapid fire us with. And let's enjoy the conversation, have a little bit of wine, and you sip your vodka. And
Seltzer water.
Seltzer water, I'm
Seltzer
sorry.
water was
Sorry.
fine.
Kids.
Gotta keep all those assholes out of my business.
Right. Water.
All right. Screw it. Let's get right in, man. I read an article today.
Okay.
It was talking about Bernard Arnault and him passing his empire down to his kid.
All
Kid
right.
is 29 years old, 27. 27 or 29, I can't remember.
Mhm.
But and he's got his hand on the business. Period. Point blank.
Just the
Multi-billion.
LVVM, the house that
LVM,
owns all
yeah.
of the fashion and
Louis
brands.
Vuitton,
Yeah.
the entire empire.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, like Louis Vuitton is like a small sector of their empire.
that's one of the biggest. That is the biggest luxury entertainment brand on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I read that, and then I think back to Tyler Perry's statements, essentially saying his kid is going to have to figure it out on his own.
Did he actually say that, or was that?
Well, it's
Kinda taken out of
paraphrasing. It's not taken out of context. That's just me paraphrasing.
Okay.
And who knows if he was serious or not? But it got me thinking of like, why on one side of the aisle, and I know it's not for everybody. I know not everybody does this, but why do you think, for the most part, on our side of the aisle, that ideology stands, that our lineage is going to have to struggle the same way we did in order to appreciate it? Where does that come from?
How many hours, days do we have? 'Cause we could go into a long discussion about.
We got 40 minutes.
All right. Try to break this down really quickly. And I don't want to diverge too much into mathematics and neurobiology, but the human mind can be programmed the same way I would sit down and write the instruction code for training a large language model or machine learning. So much of what we do, 90 to 95% of what you do, you're not even aware of what you're doing. You download the rest of your life's actions from the time you're about 1 to about 7. And you got that from your parents, and they got that from their parents. And you've been socialized to behave and act a certain way. Black people have been so traumatized from the past 4 or 5 centuries of enslavement and then the rest of the year of slavery, de facto doing the law, that you have been socialized. If I get anything, they're still gonna have to struggle too. It's not a building of a cohesive group that will, from one generation, pass on and make a network of sustainability. Now, that's not to say it's not always there, because it is. There have been several towns, and not just Rosewood and Tulsa. There's been tons of towns. We got one right in Mississippi.
Seneca Village, yeah.
Mount Bayou.
And
that's where that's still first historical Black hospital is still there. So it's kind of crazy to paint it with a broad brush. Like, why don't we do that? No, some of us don't do that. Some of us do. It's just some of the things that are done by certain people are amplified more than others. There are plenty of people quietly building wealth, building familiar relationships, building social and political power. They're just not out spraying it for the world to see. And they don't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do you think we gatekeep harder, though?
Gatekeep what?
Resources, advancement, like within, like it's the same struggle question.
I don't think we do it any more than any other population. We're all human beings. For some reason, everything that Black people does negative gets magnified much more than any other people.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't think we gatekeep anymore. There's plenty of people that I'm donating all my money to my kids. They each get $500,000 each and they got to figure it out. Nobody gives a shit when somebody says it, but anything that somebody Black does instantly becomes this thing if it's anything, leaning toward negativity. Now, I don't know why the man would say that, but the thing about it is, of course, he's not putting his kids, abandoning them out. They got a top-notch education.
Yeah.
They grew up in a household where they weren't worried about food insecurity. All of that plays hell with your psyche and sometimes your genetics. Now, there's a lot of arguments about epigenetics, so epigenetics isn't the reordering of your genes, it's the reordering of the gene expression. So they're doing studies now saying that if, you go through trauma at a certain trimester when you're pregnant, that can have generational effects on you. And then some people argue against that because supposedly when the embryo is formed, all that epigenetic record gets wiped to a new one, and then you're born. But there are carryover effects, and we're finally starting to see how trauma can rewrite the expression of certain genes, and that carries forward through generations. And who else on this planet has gone through more trauma than Black Americans?
You've talked about that before, about how there needs to be a rewriting of our DNA in order to...
Well, like I said, these trauma effects don't hit the genes themselves. They hit the expression of the genes. Just like you could have the propensity for certain types of cancer, but it may never express itself if you exercise, take care of yourself, and take care of your diet. Mm-hmm. It's in the book, but that doesn't mean the reader has to read the book and express those proteins. That's the epigenetic part. So you have the genes and you have the way they're expressed. Trauma seems to hit the expression of the genes. We're trying to define that. I mean, they're trying to definitively find proof of that, I should say.
So we also had an interesting conversation dating back to when we talk about genealogy and protection on Black women feeling unprotected, dating back to slavery times.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't protect them. Expound on that for me, or those listening.
All right, real quick. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with when the Moors had control of big parts of Spain and Christendom, they were finally pushed out when the Spanish thrones were unified. I think Francisco and Isabella. So in 1492 was the end of a process called the Reconquista, where they were Christendom finally pushed the Moors off the Iberian Peninsula and unified the kingdom of Spain. So when that happened, the Portuguese started going to the western coasts of Africa, trading forts, and that was the kind of inception of transatlantic slave trade, where the Kingdom of Spain was able to unify, became powerful, pushed the Moors out, and then they started the exploration in the New World. So when they came over and the conquistadors came over and they conquered the New World, then they started the sugar plantations. Spain was once the wealthiest European power. Those economies do not work in those brutal environments without forced labor. So they had some white Europeans over, they died. And of course they extinguished all the native people there, and they started the importation of African slaves into the New World. And with that happening, that's when all the trauma with us here started. So the first couple of people, you're not a slave, you're a person that exists in the state of slavery. You're a human that has been put in a position of being enslaved. So it was very tough at first because people who are free are going to fight you. Mm-hmm. So there were tons of deaths. But after you're in that condition for a couple of generations, almost anybody will get turned into a subservient, almost animal. So let's skip forward a few decades. We can go up from the 1500s up to the 1800s, to right before the Civil War. By that time, constant denigration. I've been socialized into being a broken, subservient person to some extent. And you're together. You're not really married. You didn't have any civil or human rights, but you're in your little cabin or slave hut. The overseer or whomever comes down, rapes the woman you with. She's torn. She knows you want to defend her and you want to too, but if you do, you're dead. And humans are basically programmed to live with a few basic drives. One of them is self-preservation. You might do it anyway. She stops you. She don't want to see you die. So there's two things operating. Consciously, she does not want to see you die, so she stops you. Subconsciously.
From defending her.
Right.
Yeah.
I need to be defended. I'm not being defended. There's an open psychic wound that is not healed for the past 300 or 400 years. It's carried forward to right now. And Black women have legitimate beef about this shit. So news, woman goes missing, fucking whole might of the United States comes out. If Black college girls go missing, nobody says shit. If I was a Black woman, I'd be pissed off too. And even with that in place of some of the equalizing of gender roles, there is still a psychological impetus. It's like, I want protection. Protect me. So until that's addressed, we're gonna have problems.
You know, it's kind of speaking on issues from slavery that still work today. I was reading a couple of things that stem from that time.
Yeah.
And I found out that the cry it out method for kids stemmed from that.
Elaborate on that a little bit. The cry it out method.
The cry it out method is like when parents just let the kids cry.
Just let them just shut up.
Like
I'm not gonna come hold you and grab it. Yeah.
So what would essentially, when during slavery times,
I got kids and I never did that.
The women would have to go work the fields, period.
Oh, they would have to. They would have to. They would have a choice unless you wanted to.
And the kids obviously weren't old enough to work the fields. And so the crying needing to be, the nurturing from the mom needing to be there. Slavery was like, get your ass out in the field. You got work to do. And the kid was just left there to cry until they eventually just stopped crying.
You know, that carries forward lifelong psychological impacts. That's why I used to date somebody who used to, there was a program where she would go certain hours and hold these babies in the hospital, like either abandoned babies or mothers. If a child doesn't have human contact at a certain period, it gives you, you can be, certain illnesses can develop, and there's also a lot of psychological impacts that it has if you're denied human affection and touch at an early age.
So that's what we should be asking of school shooters.
I mean,
hey, were you
held?
Shit going on? Were you held during this period? That should be an evaluation for kids coming in.
Yeah.
Hey, at 7 months, were you ever
Not
left
that they
alone?
will remember, but you know.
Downplaying achievements was another that stemmed from that, because if you were, you would go for more money in the market. Like your kids, they would downplay the achievements to like others, as not to be seen as smart because you would be sold off.
That. Okay, maybe, but the thing about it is, some of this stuff is just human shit. It's happening to everybody. You know what? One of the most, I'm not gonna say diagnosed because everybody doesn't go in and get psychotherapy, but if you did a survey, it's 90% of people report, maybe even more of that, some feelings of inadequacy or a little bit of lack of self-worth. Why is that so common among humans? There's something going on here, period. So we're being fed incessantly feelings are being programmed, lack of worth. Like I was telling my son, Stop looking at that shit on Instagram and all that.
Yeah.
It's all fake. It's an exploitation of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Mhm.
And none of that shit is real. None of it. Absolutely none of it. From the fitness influencers to the person pretending like they got a Lambo. That is all bullshit to trigger inadequacy and feelings of inferiority to put you in a state where you're easily controlled mentally and you become docile and you become a purchaser who produces nothing. And you sit and just become this anxiety-ridden robot. There's nothing but a unable to create or move blob.
You know, I literally had to fight programming today with a Tesla driver.
Wait, what?
I had to fight. No, straight up. I had to like check myself because I was driving in traffic and I wasn't going to let him over. I was like, "Fuck you," you know. But I had to go. Whoa. Hey,
why am I getting this bent out of shape?
yeah.
Like
Why am I reacting like this? It's not him.
You know what you just did?
Yeah.
So there's a thing where you step back from yourself and observe yourself reacting like an animal instead of taking in information and pausing and responding.
Mm-hmm.
That allows you to self-reflect, control, and not knee-jerk reactions. And the more you do that, the more you're able to establish some type of hold on yourself. And it begins to, I'm not trying to be all weird and mystical, but it seriously begins to affect the way you see reality and the way reality responds to you, because it's a feedback loop. So if you exert control over yourself, and then that slight pause between stimulus and just an animal reaction, you can respond appropriately. 90% of negative, no, I'm not going to say that, but much of negativity that you would generate yourself wouldn't be generated. And you'd be able to get a handle and grasp on things.
Fucking cornflakes. I had cornflakes.
What the fuck?
I had cornflakes. Let's stay on like coding and programming. Code switching. Let's talk about that for a second.
Code switching.
Code switching, man. I hear that. And I hear people talk about it and say it like it's some super skill that only they possess. And it's like, bro, everybody knows.
Everybody does that shit.
Yeah, everybody does that shit. So it's like, why not just talk a certain way the whole time? Like, are you being real if you code switch?
Yes, because here's the thing. Everybody, okay, you know what the word person means?
Who?
Person.
No,
Person, persona. It means mask. So everybody, you're not one person. You're not one unified Dave. There's 100 of y'all fighting at any moment in time for control of the central personality that faces the world, right? So you're constantly wearing masks. You're not the same person when you talk to your parents, when you talk to your friends, when you talk to your girl or your wife, and you talk to the people you work with. That in itself is a form of code switching. So if we take it a little bit further to where we have a society at whole, and you have one set of norms that's considered politically dominant, everybody adheres to that. You know what's interesting about English? It's not like French or Spanish where you had like High Latin and you had Vulgar Latin, where there's a correct way you structure things. Mm-hmm. English doesn't have that. So what people used to call proper or speaking a certain way with that transatlantic accent was a way that the upper class spoke. So the lower classes mimic that. The enunciation, the sharp consonants at the end, and da-da-da-da-da, because even in a society that calls itself classless, like we don't have the classes that they had in old Europe with the nobility and certain stuff. Even here, there's classes. People look at you and you're giving off 1,000 signals as soon as you walk into a room or you interact with somebody. So they look at your clothes, your dress, the way you carry yourself. And one of the first things that another human notices about another person, even more so than what you're saying, is how you say it. So you're automatically being classified, and you're doing it to other people because you've been socialized to do it. So moderating or modifying your speech in certain situations is perfectly normal to do. It's ridiculous to think a person wouldn't do it. You can't tell me you interact the same way you do with your brothers and sisters as you do with your lover, your parents, or your coworkers. It's natural human behavior.
Have you seen Avatar?
I saw the first one a long time ago.
Was Jake? Jake is the protagonist.
The guy whose brother, he was the dude in the wheelchair, right?
Yes.
And then he did the consciousness transfer into the.
Was he code switching or reverse code switching? Because he became one of the blue people in order to try to take their land away. And we can talk about like the super, whether they want to admit it or not, the symbolism in that as well.
It was nothing to hide. It was so blatant. It was partially a white savior trope. It was partially a metaphor for ultra industrialization taking over a native population to exploit resources. And then the white guy who goes native and then wants to defend the natives against his own people. I mean, that shit is, so it wasn't hidden. It was so blatant in the face that you couldn't get mad at it because that's exactly what he was trying to say. Was it code switching
or reverse code switching?
I don't know if I'd call either that. He was just a dude who was trying to just do a job in the military, and then, he was paralyzed, but he was a genetic match for his brother. So he goes in, does a consciousness transfer, and then he's in this big, powerful body again that works. And
he can run again.
Yeah, and then first he's on a mission, and then, he, I guess, falls in love with the girl alien and, wants to defend them against the megacorps.
So like staying on movies and fucked upness. In another episode with Zeta, who you've met, I talked to her about my feelings watching Anthony Mackie make his debut as Captain America in Brave New World.
Yeah, okay.
And it fucked me up because I couldn't see the movie properly because I was not used to seeing a black superhero. And I was really mad at myself because I was like, how you gonna be this old and can't separate? And it's like, so was I programmed or like what is... It took me a while to accept him in that role.
Yes, you're programmed from... Okay, so...
Yeah.
Go back to machine learning.
Who?
Machine learning. If I program a model to do predictive analytics, right? And we have what we call deep hidden layers. So you have your input layers and you have various layers of what we call neurons that they were first made to mimic the hierarchical, what they thought was a hierarchical way that a human brain is organized. Nothing really like it, but we just use that as a metaphor. So I put in the inputs and I give it what's called labeled data. If I want it to associate a certain pattern of behavior or an image or whatever, I train it. Over a certain number of cycles of training, it learns to make these predictions and I can feed it data it has been trained on and it makes new predictions. So you have centers in your brain that acquire language, that are thinking, all your cognitive skills. Yes, you're biological, you're not made of silicon and metal, but the human brain can go under the same type of training regimen. And you absolutely have no say in the training you receive as a child. And that dictates your behavior for the rest of your life. So 100% you are programmed to do that. Nobody has to explicitly come to you and say, black man is stupid, ain't that shit. You as a child, you watch a movie where every hero was a white male and you begin to associate with that. If a machine can do it, your brain, which is infinitely more complex, can certainly take on that task and it begins to associate certain inputs with certain outputs.
All right, well then why did I feel such pride and was swelled with pride to see Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther?
Because you have two systems going on. You have your subconscious that received all that programming that you really can't touch and go. You can't just say, I don't like that, I want to change. Yeah. If you could do that, you stop smoking, stop doing whatever you want to do, ingrained behavior. Then you have your other conscious front-facing Dave that makes day-to-day intelligent choices. Mm-hmm. You chose to get up and put on that shirt. You chose to come here. You chose to have this conversation with me. But you have behavior that you can't touch. That part of your persona that you control has the ability to feel proud about that, even though it's kind of fighting against this underlying behavior. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things with cognitive dissonance. Two opposing forces and you feel the pain of that. Put it this way. Just suppose there was a white guy in here who had been taught all his life, black people, dumb, ignorant, stupid. And somebody comes in who just did some genius development in front of mathematics and he's rich. He sees that and his ingrained belief is that black men are dumb and stupid. And then this mathematical genius walks in. That's two divergent opinions that will cause the dissonance in his brain. And he'll have to try to reconcile that or he'll ignore it.
Yeah. And then that person will have the nerve to look at the mathematical genius as like, maybe he's not a genius if he's thinking.
Well, he's trying to reconcile the two divergent
Yeah.
facts. One's a fact and one's is not. He thinks it's a fact. He's been trained that way. That are causing the pain in his brain.
So I think the NFL got in trouble for that.
For what?
Or when it came to, and I'm butchering it a little bit, but when it came to CTE.
Oh, the concussion?
Concussion.
Yeah.
They were saying they didn't pay out as much to black NFL players because they said the mental capacity wasn't, it wasn't as much
really
as
happened?
the other, huh?
That happened?
They were doing that up until 2021, yeah. And it was like, damn, man, can we get your break? Like Jerry Jones, you know guys' dick sizes. Like it's just, I'm still,
all right, yeah.
I'm still wondering how he knew that, but
because he's probably obsessed with going into the locker room, like the dude with the NBA players. Remember the guy? He had I think she was black. The wife with the bolt-on, she was attractive, and then he was an older guy, and there was some that wasn't his wife.
They got in trouble.
Yeah, but he was going in the locker room, stroking on dude's arm like he was at the Kentucky Derby with one of his thoroughbreds, like in the session shit with some of these dudes, man.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. So, 12 Years a Slave, one of my favorite movies.
I never seen that shit. I'm not watching any more fucking slave movies.
After that movie, I was like, all right, I'm done with slave pics. Like, it's like, I get keeping the history on there
That's
and
fine.
like knowing, but it's like, yo, I'm good with this.
You're being programmed.
Huh?
You're being programmed.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm good with this because I was like, this is just like the oldest form of the NFL Combine. Like it's literally like version 1 of the NFL Combine. Because I was like, dude, like, come on, man. Like, I just constantly ask myself, like, what the fuck did we do to everybody? Why is everybody so mad at us? Like, what?
I could tell you, but then I can't talk about it here. I just got back from Atlantis, so I had to come back to the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It was all right. I was trying to get you to go, but
I know.
If we,
I know, Dave.
I know, Dave. Why can't we go there though? Is it too much for people?
With the interdimensional and the folding of space to come here on this plane of existence, I don't know if people want to hear that, man. I'll tell you what's interesting about that, though. 20 or 30 years ago, especially where we are, you've gotten stoned for even saying something like that now. Now, if you don't talk about, affecting reality and tarot cards and other realms of existence, people think you're weird if you don't have knowledge of that. So there's something happening. There's some dynamic that's changing here.
Man, a dynamic, but I think it's also people are just trying to find ways to cope. Like it's
that too.
Because what's happening now is like they're selling cars on the White House lawn. It's like, what?
Look up something real quick. Look up extinction burst.
Extinction burst?
Look up that term.
Yeah, I think I did that last night.
Tell me that. I think that's what
I'm going to ask her if she's still here.
I think that's what we're living in now.
What's that?
I think that's what we're living in now. When there's about to be a system change, the regime or whatever is going out does everything it can on the way out to destroy before the new takes hold.
An extinction burst in behavioral psychology refers to a temporary increase in the frequency, intensity, or duration of a behavior when reinforcement for that behavior is removed, often followed by a decrease and eventual extinction of the behavior.
So,
sounds like a very intelligent way to say like a star burning out.
It's like if there's a regime or whatever in control of something and it's dying or being forced out, whatever, it intensifies to try to hold on or wreck. And that's in psychological terms, but I'm putting it in human political terms or social terms. if this regime is about to be moved, put it like this. If you got somebody living in your house that's fucking up and you're like, you better get out my shit. And they kick in the walls, do a bunch of stuff before you can kick their asses out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we got going on now. You just said they're selling cars on the White House lawn, bro. And I'm not going to touch on that topic anymore because...
Yeah. No, that was just I was just putting that. Like an extinction burst, we're talking like other humans or another form of life?
I don't know, are we? Are we?
Interesting. All right, we're back off that. Fuck it. You're hitting with the Cat Williams right now. I was like, when I was watching
hitting it with the Cat women.
Because, something will come up and somebody will say something and Cat Williams just like, I mean, if the towel is white, it's white.
Right. I'm not trying to be all coy and...
Dog, what the fuck does that mean, man? Like, it was, like, I'm tired of Rick Ross does that dumb shit. If she want to roll with the ballers,
right,
the ballers gonna roll. Huh. Cut this shit off, question, man. What am I listening to?
Yeah.
And I think people are just saying stuff now. And I think if you say it cryptically while rubbing your kneecaps,
it makes it sound intelligent, like you some deep shit.
He knows something.
And that shit about deep as a rain puddle.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
Like, go eat some more mashed potatoes. And yeah, there you go. But anyway, let's talk about this money.
All right.
You put me on a fact, and I'm sure it was pretty old, but it floored me at the time because if you go to these towns and you look at them, you're like, you can see the remnants. Like when I go to Vicksburg, yeah, I can see the remnants, but I'm like, it's falling apart. Yeah. How could it lose that? The largest collection of millionaires at one time in the United States was right here.
Natchez.
In Natchez. Mm-hmm. And it's nuts. Like, I know that it's trying to make a reemergence, but when you go to these towns, it's like crazy. And obviously, I know the answer being cotton, textiles, slavery, the whole nine. And people love to say, oh, Lincoln freed the slaves, but, it's Lincoln freed the slaves just to fuck with the economy of the South because they wasn't.
I mean, it's more than that. He needed to win the war. It was going very badly at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And the South was trying to reach out to Europe, Britain and France for aid and assistance and for recognition as a legitimate nation. So, I mean, at first, Lincoln just wanted to preserve the Union. Well, let's clear something up. I don't ever want to hear that shit about the Civil War wasn't about slavery. So, okay, what the fuck was it about then?
No,
states'
absolutely.
rights?
Huh?
States' rights, right? States' rights to do what? Own people.
Yeah, they were like, you're not going to take my shit.
If you read the articles of secession for every state, the first thing that they mention in every one of those articles is that the institution of slavery is necessary for our way of being and life. And on this planet, the black man should be subjugated to white men. Some garbage like that. It's in every article of secession, whether it's South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, whatever. So
that is nuts when you think about it.
It's in the articles of secession. Nuts. This is what they proclaimed in their legislative sessions. So with that being said, Lincoln at first was like, you guys don't have the right to secede. You have to preserve the Union. And this goes back to the agrarian powers versus an industrial power. And that's why the South could have never won anyway. You're not going to beat an industrial power with factories, infrastructure, logistics. First of all, you had a fucked up cause anyway. Then on top of that, you're fighting a power with infrastructure, planning, logistics. There were no gun foundries in the South. There were no factories in the South. The railroads, they had limited, stuff for logistics. They couldn't win. So, but the thing they did have was a zealot belief in their cause of enslaving people, the will to fight. And then they did have more people who were able to do riding and combat and fight like that because it was an agrarian rural economy where you had almost like a feudal system. You had the rich aristocracy that owned land, and you had their overseers and people that hunted and that type of class. Then you had poor serfs, and then you had the slaves.
Mhm.
And even if you didn't own a slave, you felt like, well, I'm better than the slaves, and your whole work depended upon the plantation economy. So that's another myth about, well, the people fighting in the war didn't own slaves. I don't give a shit if they own slaves or not. Their whole way of life was predicated upon slavery. So they were defending that. Hell, did the soldiers who were going over to fight wars overseas own oil companies? No.
Yeah.
Or whatever soldier in history is not one of the owner classes, or they wouldn't be infantry, So
And I wish more people understood that fact of when we talk about, we built this country. We're not saying that we literally built it.
well, some
Well,
people
no,
did.
we are, but we're saying that the free labor that was incurred upon us, was able to set
Yeah.
others up. They were able to incur wealth
Yeah.
because your labor was free. Yeah, you might have gone and put the plans together and drawn it up and made the deals, but we still stitched a lot of it together for fucking free and for scraps of food and whatnot at the same time. And speaking of stitching, I remember a conversation we were having about the highway system in the United States
Yeah.
and how it's set up to where we can, is it never be invaded or tough to
No,
be invaded?
so after World War II, when Eisenhower became president, is when they connected the state highway system together. So
Yeah.
it was done for communication reasons, to travel. It's insane. So like when our parents were younger, and their parents, say you wanted to drive from here to Memphis or something.
Mhm.
It wasn't like hopping on 55. You were on some back road,
Yeah.
2-lane bullshit. And that's what the whole country was like. So Eisenhower and then put together the interstate system, huge, massive public works. It's incredible. He had won World War II, world famous general. Then he became president, and they put this infrastructure in place. And it was also planes could land in emergency on the highway system, and it was a way for communication and infrastructure to spread defense capabilities across the country and to remain interconnected as a whole. Because at that time the car culture was coming into vogue. They had kind of, I don't know how far I should go with this, but there was so the first cars that were invented were battery operated. A lot of people don't know this.
What?
Like one of the first cars that was done by Carl Benz in the late 1800s. He named one of the cars after his daughter, Mercedes. So those old original cars, the car was named after a girl, not the other way around. He had a daughter named Mercedes. He named his first vehicles out there. So these cars ran off of either peanut oil, some type of biofuel, or batteries. These big, huge iron nickel batteries. And then all of that got kind of killed with the rise of suburbs after World War II. Everybody have a house and a car. And you have the culture where if you kill electric train lines and all that, with the rise of oil, petrochemicals, then you need petroleum distillates. If you're not living in the core of the city anymore, you live 20 miles out, get a car, gas, the rise, that was all tied into it. I'm kind of like skipping over a lot and narrowing it down, but that was part of it. One of the first wave of cars that came out had these big, huge nickel iron batteries in them that you would use. So electrical vehicles are like from the very early 1900s. It's kind of fascinating if you look it up.
Shit, yeah. I know you got to roll, so I'm gonna end it there, man, because I need to go look this up. I need to go
look it up now.
I need to go figure that out. But man, shit. Thanks for coming through and dropping some knowledge, man.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Oh, man.
I'm gonna get one more glass of wine, y'all. Then I'm out.
Oh, you just broke the wall, dog. They know you're here now. They know that you're real.
Do they? Do they, dog? Do they know that?
I mean, if you say words, then the words will be said. Everybody, thank y'all for listening. This is Dave Manners, Behind the Manners. Omar Morris. Y'all be safe, and remember, you can't get lost on the highways because north to south end in odd numbers. East to west are even numbers. Dave tells you.
True,
Peace.
Sir. Peace.
All right. We did it. On schedule. Fuck yeah.